My name is Renee McKenna. I'm a therapist and shamanic healer, and this is Shawn Murphy. And we are going to start a series on spiritual parenting or raising spiritual children, topics we're both very passionate about. And Shawn, why don't you talk a little bit about who you are?
I am an engineer, I'm a philosopher, I'm a parent, I am a spiritual consultant, working with many different types of clients in clairvoyance and also in dealing with spiritual children. So one of the things that I found really interesting in my research into raising children was Joey Gauld's 10 priorities in educating young people. And today we're going to talk about the first of those priorities, which is truth over harmony. And that may sound strange, but it's in your family. Do you promote harmony, which is you kind of skim over the deeper issues, or do you really talk about the truth of how your children feel and be able to address those issues in a deeper level?
So I'd like to jump right in on that topic, truth over
Okay.
harmony. And from my perspective, really particularly concerned with spiritual parenting and the perspectives of parents and the idea of our own truth and how do we manage our own truth emotionally and socially, relationally, and spiritually with our children. And when is it appropriate to share that truth with our children? When do we need to do our own back end work with other grown-ups and our own advisors or therapists or in our own spiritual practice rather than just laying our truth on our children in an unadulterated way? And how does that model or make room for our children's truth as well? What do you think about that?
Yes, for me, one of the big issues that I've dealt with in my life raising my daughter is in listening to and forcing myself to listen to her truth and listen to their truth, instead of telling them what their truth should be. So, as if the child says they're sad, well, you shouldn't be sad. You should be happy. And instead, I learned to say, well, tell me why you're sad, you know, and is there something I can do to help you in this time that you're sad? Because we shouldn't just brush over their emotions. We can learn a lot about our children if we listen to their emotions and listen to their truth.
And so that idea of learning about our children, we also, if we look deeply at that dynamic that's really common, what you just suggested, is that we learn about ourselves. And so if someone, say, is uncomfortable with sadness, then they would be uncomfortable with their children being sad, right? And so this is the beauty of parenting in that it calls us to continue our own personal growth as we help to evolve our children. That active and engaged parenting is actually about continuing to grow ourselves. And so what we want to offer them, we need to really look deeply at what our own perspectives and motives and limitations are and where we're being called to grow. So if someone's uncomfortable, I was actually raised in a home where sadness was disallowed. And my own parents were very emotionally limited because of their own difficulties and unresolved emotional issues with anything that was uncomfortable or sad or considered like a negative emotion. And so they didn't want me to have those things because it made them uncomfortable with those things. And so this is really, I think, the challenge of spiritual parenting is to continually confront ourselves and our own limitations. And it's a really kind of perpetual opportunity to heal and to continue our own evolutionary path when we have these beings in our life that we're trying to care for.
No, I understand that completely. I tell people that my daughter raised my wife and I. We didn't raise her. She taught us much more about ourselves than we were able to teach her about herself. And as you say, it's an opportunity not just for parents, but also for um, teachers who have the opportunity to be with young people every day. They can learn from the young people if they're open to learning from them, because they bring so much wisdom into this lifetime. Um, as their internal soul, immortal soul, comes into this lifetime and has so much wisdom in it, and we should listen to that wisdom and learn from it.
I love that term, immortal soul, and to really look at the children that we are charged with caring for as souls that we are helping to escort rather than as property that belongs to us or extensions of ourself, right? And that those souls come in with their own path and their own experience to bring and things to learn, or however you understand what it means to incarnate as a human. And how can we be with the mystery of the individual soul of each child and to be able to support and nourish that rather than having an agenda for what it should be, which is kind of attuned to playing God.
Well, that's true. They come into this life with gifts, and maybe gifts that we don't understand. Um, I mean, I was gifted with a musical child, for example, but I'm tone deaf. Um, so I couldn't be a mentor to her, but I could be a cheerleader.
Mhm.
Um, I could find a proper coach to help her to develop this talent, instead of saying, no, why don't you go into accounting because it's something I know, so I can teach that to you.
Right. And that's the opportunity of our own expansion and evolution as parents, that our children um, are always slightly different from us, even if they are chips off the old block. They all have their own unique perspective and experiences and desires and talents and gifts. And our job as spiritual parents is to be present and open to the truth of the child, and to be able even to help them navigate that truth within themselves, particularly if it might diverge. I work with I have a lot of clients that are non-binary and transsexual and have been really misunderstood and forced into things that didn't feel like it was authentic to them until they were in adulthood and they were able to come into their own uniqueness in the world. And so, how do we be with what is actually true about our child, to be able to even see it and then to be able to support it for them and to be able to navigate whatever we need to within ourselves to be able to provide that for them?
Yeah, and the opportunity that you get if you cultivate that relationship with your child of acknowledging their truth and not denying their truth. Maybe you don't understand it, but at least you acknowledge it and you listen to them, listen to their truth. As they get older and get into their teenage years, they'll still come to you. Um, but if you don't listen to their truth, you'll lose them as a parent.
Well, and I think for parents who lose their children in that way, most of us have also lost ourselves. For myself, starting with that very simple thing you said, which is, oh, you shouldn't feel this way, whatever that way is, then I separated from my own authentic experience. And so it was natural for me to separate other people from it. And cost me a lot of money in therapy, actually, to get back into who I really am. And now to be able to support my children in that, and to grow in understanding. I mean, that's really I love the little acronym for intimacy. I don't think it's an acronym, but the intimacy is into me, you see. and the intimacy with anyone, children or our lovers or our coworkers or anyone, is really to allow others to see into us and to see into them and to grow in understanding of the differences of another rather than judging them or being uncomfortable and shying away from that.
And I'd like to turn it around once, and that is that um, my child got the greatest learnings from me when I shared my truth with her.
Mhm.
And I think that's a intimate relationship that you can build with your child, is being able to be vulnerable to your child and tell them your truth, you know, what happened to me and how I failed when I went down this path,
Mhm.
and not just always try and be the harmonious parent who's making everybody happy and everything's fine and okay. That's this difference between truth and harmony.
Right. To be able to be with the difficulties of life. I think that's one of the
Yeah.
real growing edges of parenting is there's a desire that we want often to have our children just to be comfortable all the time and not to suffer and really to express to them the ideas that suffering is a part of life and that we can be resilient, we can heal, we can grow, we can get stronger from those challenges and we can overcome them rather than um, trying to avoid them and create kind of a false narrative that everything's perfect all the time.
Yes. Yeah. And the society we live in today doesn't celebrate failure.
No.
They do the opposite and try to avoid failure. But you really learn through failure. I mean, you ask any entrepreneur, and they'll tell you how many times they failed before they were successful. Um, Failure is very important that we celebrate it, that we come out of it in strength and come out of it with learning.
I just had a really beautiful exchange with my daughter last night. She's a junior in high school, and she had a bullying experience last year and left the high school that she was in. And we ended up making a decision after a couple different iterations to move to a different city. And it worked for me and my work as well. And she's starting her new school today, as a matter of fact. And she had always been very uptight about getting good grades and being on time to school and had actually been quite anxious about performance, even though she always did really well. And last night she said to me, Mom, I don't think I'm going to do very good in Spanish this year. And I said, oh, she doesn't love language. And she said, but there's been a change. I don't care so much anymore if I get a C in Spanish, because one of the things that's happened over this last year is that I've really learned that everything works out, even if you can't imagine how it would. And that these little things that used to feel like so important are less important in the big picture. And I thought to myself, that lesson is so much more beneficial to trust the universe that things will work out and to take lemons and make lemonade than getting an A in Spanish. It really made me happy that
Yeah.
although she doesn't consider herself a spiritual person, that is a spiritual principle of trust, which I'm sure we'll talk about at some point in this series.
Yes, definitely. And going back to what I said earlier, is if we share those failures with our children, that helps them to gain confidence that, well, my mother survived through failure, my
Right.
father survived through failure, and maybe I can survive too.
Right. Well, it's not even about surviving. It's about failure is just one part of a never ending cycle.
Yeah.
And I don't even consider failure a thing anymore. It's all just experience at this point. Because so many of the things that I didn't get that at the time seemed like a failure, actually, I'm so glad they didn't work out now in the larger winding path that they have led me down, right? So who's to say what
Yes.
is success and failure in the short run?
No, that's very true. But a lot of kids nowadays are getting stuck in this teenage years and considering suicide
Mm.
because they don't have that confidence, right? They
Right.
weren't able to build up that confidence that this is not the end of the world. What just happened to me? It's There's actually something after this tragic thing that happened to me, whatever it was. Life goes on, and it's part of life.
Right. And again, moving to approach our life on a soul level, which is a whole lifetime of experience and growth and sharing, rather than an agenda of checklists of successes that need to be checked off. And I've had many people come to me over the years who've climbed the ladder of success and realized the ladder was against the wrong wall. And so that idea, right, of just sharing life experience and the resilience that things do work out, even if we can't imagine how they will, rather than a lot of the pressure, particularly in the teenage years, the kids get, oh, you have to get into the right college or your life will be over, and it's a lie. Actually, it's a total lie. I have a very windy path with lots of pitfalls in it, and have ended up in the most fulfilling place I could ever imagine through that windy path. And I wouldn't have got here if it wasn't for all those pitfalls.
Oh, definitely, definitely. As I grew up, I learned if if the direction I wanted to go became too hard, maybe that wasn't the right direction for me to go in. And it turned out that was true. It was better to go in the other direction, the one where the universe was with me, not
Right.
me pushing against the universe.
Well, there's a balance with that too, though, because I was also raised that if it was difficult or uncomfortable, you should avoid it. And so I'm a weightlifter. It's one of my favorite things to do. And if you don't lift weights that are really heavy, almost to the point of pain sometimes, you don't get stronger. And so you don't want to hurt yourself, but there is resistance actually makes us resilient and builds strength. So there's a kind of a balance of easy is right. I'm all about green lights and open doors, but also we do need to push against our own growing edge, or else if we do what we always did, we're going to get what we always got. And if we want something different, we do need to go outside our comfort zone and learn to tolerate discomfort.
No, I completely agree with you on that. It's a matter of knowing, when to take a weight off the bar at one point, not
Yes,
to try and kill yourself with it, right?
exactly. Right. You
Yes.
don't want to pull a muscle. You want to just make it
Yeah.
stronger. Absolutely.
Mhm.
So truth over harmony. And where do you fall with that um, in your own life within yourself and in your life, in your relationships with your children or those children that you care for? That's a large principle I think we can all sit with and revisit over and over and continue to grow from.
Yes, thank you. It is important not just with your children, but also with your loved ones, your coworkers. It's if you suppress something just to keep harmony, at some point it's going to come up and bite you.
So we're going to continue this conversation and we may be inviting others to join us as well. And so
Yes, that's good.
we hope you'll join us again for more on spiritual parenting and raising spiritual children.